These are highly sophisticated killers. And when they give $5 million or $2 million or $1 million to Jeb, they have him just like a puppet. He'll do whatever they want. He is their puppet. Believe me.
Donald Trump on the campaign trail in Iowa over the weekend, taking rhetorical aim at Jeb Bush, warning Iowa caucus goers that Jeb will be a puppet for the Washington lobbyist. A whole bunch of presidential candidates went to the Iowa State Fair this weekend to campaign in that first-in-the-nation caucus state. Is this a must-stop for 2016 hopefuls? Let's talk about it, and to do so, we bring in the editor-in-chief of CNSnews.com, a big difference. He was also the national campaign manager for Pat Buchanan's run in 1996, our good friend Terry Jeffery. And Skyping in from Iowa, knows more than a thing or two about the politics of that state, Steve Deace, radio host and author of the book, Rules for Patriots, How Conservatives Can Win Again. Steve, first to you, for conservatives to win in Iowa, do they have to stop by the Iowa State Fair?
Not necessarily, but if you look going back to 1976, the same top two candidates, and that's the first year that the Republicans had Iowa as their first-in-the-nation caucus, the same top two candidates have always finished first and second. It's just a matter of which order. They're always the top two, JD, and it is the candidate that is the strongest with the business community or the GOP establishment and the candidate that is the strongest with evangelicals. Now, Donald Trump is not going to be the strongest candidate with either of those two groups when it's all said and done. So going to the state fair is a good move for him and Ben Carson as well, because they're going to have to bring people that don't traditionally take part in a partisan caucus process, new people to the polls, maybe as many as 10, 15, 20,000 new people to the polls if they're actually going to pull this off and win this thing. So I don't think everybody has to go there, but I think if your game plan is, I've got to bring people that don't typically take part in the Iowa caucuses to the caucuses come February the 1st, it's a good move for those two candidates.
Well, I think back to 1996, Terry Jeffery, and I think it's fair to say that you and Pat Buchanan ran a populist shoestring campaign in terms of not having a lot of money, but having a lot of ground support. It appears that Trump has a very different thing going. He may not have a ground game, but he's got plenty of money and lots of celebrity. In fact, he didn't even stop by the soapbox sponsored by the Des Moines Register. Is he able to tap into that populist outrage, and will it work in a place like Iowa, Terry?
He could. He's definitely, Trump is tapping into some of the same issues that Pat Buchanan talked about in Iowa in 1996. We hit immigration, illegal immigration, very hard in Iowa. It's an issue that if you talk to people on the ground in Iowa in 1996, they were very concerned about it. I suspect they are now. But Pat also talked about jobs and moving jobs overseas. But I'll tell you, JD, something I know from experience about the Iowa caucus is grassroots campaigning, like Pat Buchanan did in 1996, like Rick Santorum did last time around. You go to town to town to town, you meet with a lot of people personally, you get their names, their addresses, and their phone numbers. You literally have a list of voters, and you get them out to vote. And Trump, if he's smart, better be doing that into the politicking. And then finally, I'll say, if you look back at the results of the 1996 caucus, Dubuque County, Iowa, which is up in the northeast part of Iowa, it's where the Field of Dreams is in Dubuque, heavily traditionally Democratic, but also very culturally conservative. Pat Buchanan was able to bring out a bunch of folks who historically were Democrat that came out to the Republican caucuses in 1996, and someone who's hitting the kind of message that Trump is now may have the potential to do that again.
Well, let's go to Steve Deace, who still has his roots in Iowa. And Steve, what are you getting in terms of the ground game? Are the more traditional candidates, I mean more politically astute, do they have their ground game people in place already for the caucuses, or can Trump put that together?
Well, we've got 17 candidates running, and a state where even if we have high turnout, maybe 130,000 people will vote. So you're talking about really, there's just not enough really credible people, activists on the ground to create organization for all of these candidates. If you don't have the basis of your organization on the ground right now, you are not going to create one in Iowa. Now, the good news for Donald Trump is a good friend of mine who is the best grassroots organizer in the entire state. Chuck Laudner was his very first hire. And if you look at what Trump is doing, going to the state fair, going to the Knoxville raceways, Chuck understands evangelicals, understands the grassroots in Iowa, and therefore understands that Trump's probably not going to get a lot of those voters. So he's going to have to create new voting blocks and bring them to the polls. Just along the lines of what Terry was just talking about.
And let's go back to Terry for the last word, Steve. Would Donald be well advised to take his helicopter and go to all 99 counties, Terry? 20 seconds.
Yeah, listen, JD, the more grassroots campaigning he does, the better. Literally, get the names, addresses, and phone numbers, get that list, and get your voters out on caucus night. Literally, like 130,000 people, that may be all that votes. You get 30,000, you win.
All right, fair enough. And we know the names of our two guests, Terry Jeffery from Washington, Steve Deace from Des Moines. Gentlemen, to you both, our thanks. And we'll be right back.